afternoon. Welcome to Self-Talk. My name is William Neal and I'm your host. And as always, I will attempt to demonstrate here today some techniques which come in the form of rules or axioms, which are short phrases. And these rules will explain to us how to diminish our fears, our anxiety, our panic attacks. It will enable us to take control of our anger, which may be out of control, rampant, out of bounds. We may be inflicting pain on our loved ones, unknowingly or unwillingly, but if we take control of our anger and our emotions that are giving us distress, we can have a more enjoyable and satisfactory life. Okay, let's get right down to it. Last week we were in part 3 of combating fears, how to get rid of them. This week we'll take on part 4. Our reading today comes from Abraham A. Lowe, the founder of these behavioral modification techniques, which I display here on Self-Talk. And he is doing an interview with a lady who is afraid of closed places, claustrophobia. She's afraid to be in a car, even if it's sitting still. She's afraid to be in an elevator. She's afraid to take a subway train because she feels trapped, suffocating, unable to breathe. And we begin. I have tried my best to accept what you have told me. I've read many times what you have said about the vicious cycle of fear and panic. I am convinced that you are right. And if I do not happen to be cooped up in a streetcar or in an elevator, I can reason with myself and realize that your authoritative knowledge is superior to my personal experience. I know all of that. But when I enter into an automobile, my knowledge is gone in an instant. What can I do about that? Dr. Lowe responds, what you can do is gain conviction. You have acquired knowledge, but you do not yet possess conviction. You say that your conviction fades the moment you enter into an automobile. What happens is this. At the moment that you enter into an automobile, your heart begins to palpitate. Your stomach churns, your throat contracts. To put it otherwise, your inner organs are scared. That scare communicates itself to the muscles of your arms and legs. They feel tense and heavy, and they refuse to move. In a sense, they feel paralyzed. And you'll hear various people saying, well, my arms just felt so heavy. It's almost like they were paralyzed. And this is that particular symptom. Having read the interview with Ruth, you will know that this is the beginning of a vicious cycle. The panic marches, as it were, from the inner organs that are scared to the outer muscles and then to the brain. The greater the commotion of the organs, the more intense is the paralysis of the muscles. And the more threatening is the paralysis of the muscles, the more terrifying is the fear in the brain. The vicious cycle. Fear fanning paralysis and paralysis fanning fear. But you ask what you can do. Well, you cannot dictate to the heart to stop its palpitations. You cannot dictate to the stomach to cease churning. But you can command your muscles to move, paralysis or no paralysis. And once you make the muscles move in spite of their apparent paralysis, the brain will instantly be convinced that at least one of the dread fears or dangers is without basis, without foundation, and nothing to be taken seriously. That may not do away with the commotion of the inner organs. The palpitations and the other sensations may continue. But a breach has been made in the solid rampart of the panic, a weak point, a hole. And the implicit belief in the reality of the danger has been shaken. When on the next occasion you enter into the car, the organs may again be thrown into a violent turmoil, but you will no longer be scared by the paralysis of the muscles. Assurance and conviction will now be more assuring and more convincing, with the result that the brain will be more calm. And with a calm brain, there is no possibility of a sustained panic. With the panic diminishing out in consequence of reassurance, because you've been reassured, the organs will soon quiet down, and this time the conviction will be strengthened. On the occasion of a third or a fourth or a dozen other trials, you are certain eventually to cut short the panic in its very beginning stages. This is inevitable. Then conviction will score the final triumph, and you will be cured of your fear and your incapacity. Do you understand that the way to shed your fears is to give proper direction to your muscles? And the patient responds, well, frankly, that sounds a bit too easy. It just doesn't seem possible that I should cure my fears by moving my muscles. A skeptic. It should take more than that. Dr. Lowe responds to this. It will be difficult for you to convince me that it is a bit too easy. You see, for persons suffering from this kind of fear, for them to command their muscles to move, if they feel paralyzed by the fear of taking another step, you did not mean to say that my suggestion sounds too easy. You thought it sounds too simple. I shall not enter into a detailed discussion of this very important difference or distinction. I shall merely tell you that I do not want my patients to believe that cures and remedies must necessarily be complex, involved, and time-consuming. That really isn't necessary for a cure or a remedy. It is easy to sit in a chair and be given lengthy and interesting explanations about how fears develop and how they arise. That is easy. It's complex, but easy. But if a boy is afraid of swimming or diving, it is not at all easy to make him move his muscles for the purpose of a determined jump from the diving board. That jump is simple, but difficult. Do you understand that you expect to be cured of your fears by means of complex but easy and sometimes glib explanations, instead of by means of simple but exacting directions? You want to be studied and analyzed and discussed, but you do not want to be told what to do and how to act. And this is typical after we have been suffering from our fears, and we try repeatedly to diminish them without success. Conviction has grown that we cannot shed our fears. And so that is why you see so much resistance in this patient against following Dr. Lowe's directions of behavioral modification, which will shed her of her fears. Now, what will the most lucid explanations profit you if you are seized with a deep anxiety or a paralyzing panic? In a condition of this kind, you are utterly unable to make use of the ingenious and fascinating explanations that you may have been given. If in a panic you try to remember what you learned and you try to reason out what is the sensible thing to do, your mind will fail you disastrously. The panic weakens your memory and blots out your reasoning power. All you will be able to do in a commotion of this kind is to apply simple rules, like we discuss here on Self-Talk. Their very simplicity renders them capable of being employed, because they're easily remembered. in a situation which is complex, in a situation in which complex thought is impossible. This simplicity renders them easy of execution. Now, the patient responds to this, but I say we've run out of time and we'll take this up next week, delving further in how to eradicate fears and stop a vicious cycle. All right. Our example today from people who are currently using the behavioral modification techniques of self-talk comes from the recovery website on the internet. You just punch in Recovery Inc. into a search engine and you will come to this, and you can find boards there where people post their anxieties, their panics, whatever distressing symptoms or emotions that they're having, and they provide examples and they get answers to their posts. It's a very good website, and you can get all the benefits of the things that I'm teaching here, and you can get answers from all over the world, because the recovery website is in most cities, most major cities, and foreign countries, Canada, Scotland, England, Puerto Rico. But I digress. Our example this week is from Getting Better. And I've noticed previously that Getting Better was suffering from, or is, in the recovering stages of suffering from anorexia nervosa, which Getting Better has brought under control by the use of the self-talk behavioral modification techniques that are shared in common with the recovery website. And the subject is struggled, but won. Now, let's see what that is. Been waking up in a low mood and didn't feel like doing anything at all, but sit on the couch and do nothing. I began to work myself up. I had angry temper at symptoms such as fatigue, same feeling every day. Tired of struggling with it. No feeling, the feeling will leave. In addition, I had fearful temper, that I would not be able to function today or tomorrow or ever. So I started to spot. Now she begins to look at the parts of her behavior, mental and physical, to see which ones she can take control of to diminish these distressing feelings that she's having. And she says, I realize that this feeling is distressing, but it's not dangerous. It's average to wake up like this. Who am I to be exceptional and expect to wake up like a jolly good fellow with robust energy and being perfect by having total control over myself every day? That would be exceptional. Feelings rise and fall if I don't attach danger. I realized that I was thinking and feeling like this feeling would paralyze me from doing things, and I immediately rejected that thought, and I didn't release the impulse to act on that thought, which would be probably to continue laying in bed and not getting up because she feels that she will not be able to function today, tomorrow, or ever. Just going back here a moment, it's average to wake up like this. What we strive for when we're suffering from our emotions, distressing emotions, we think that we're unique, we're the only ones in the world who are suffering from these symptoms. So the thought is, it's average. The average person is having these feelings. I'm not the only one experiencing them. That's what we mean by average. And we try to stay away from extreme to find a common middle ground, which is best for diminishing our symptoms. We don't want the perfect. We do not strive for perfection, because that is a futile goal. We just strive for average, reasonable feelings. It is the striving for perfection which drives people to distraction and also exacerbates, maintains, precipitates new symptoms, and intensifies the ones that we're presently having. But if you lower your standard and just strive for average performance, mental or physical, you become relaxed. And with that relaxation, your performance, mental and physical, actually improves. because a relaxed muscle can initiate movement very quickly as opposed to a muscle that is stressed tight. And the intellectual performance, if you're relaxed, of course you can think more clearly. Now, and you don't have obsessive thinking, so you can objectively cover all the realistic facts of the situation, the people, places, and things in outer environment, and respond accordingly by changing your attitude. Can't change the people, places, and things, but we can change the way we respond to those people, places, or things. Now, continuing on, been taking things in part acts and doing morning chores. So we look at our day and we see that we have a considerable number of tasks or chores to perform. Wow, that seems overwhelming. I feel like going back to bed, because I'm looking at all of the chores and it seems overwhelming. But if I just break it down into small parts, well, small chunks that are easily handled, focus on each small chunk and accomplish that small portion and go on to the next small portion and the next small portion without looking at the totality. Before I know it, I have covered, or I have accomplished a considerable portion of the chores because I was focused on the individual small portion instead of the overwhelming general view or total view. And this is how we make molehills out of mountains when we think are overwhelming. This is changing the way we respond to event and outer environment, changing our attitude. Can't change the event or the situation, the people, place, or thing, but we can change our response. This is what we're talking about here. Been taking things in part acts and doing morning chores and lowering standards for myself, which automatically allows us to become relaxed and our performance will improve. And endorsing, giving yourself a pat on the back for every effort. Doesn't matter the outcome of the effort, just for making the effort. Getting up out of bed, that's an effort. Hey, give myself an A. I'll go in and perform my morning hygiene. Give myself another A. Pretty soon, before you know it, you got your A game going and you feel a lot better. So you endorse for every effort, not necessarily for the outcome. Typically, if we're having distressing emotions, we have a lifetime of indicting, blaming, criticizing, putting ourselves down. And we don't realize the effect that that has on us. So, to oppose that, to eradicate that, to diminish that, we need to establish a habit of giving ourselves a pat on the back, called endorsing. Hey, way to go, good effort, all right, you did it, you know. Or whatever you might say that will motivate yourself and remind you that you're doing a good job. And this is a habit that needs to be established. All right. And we're having insecure thoughts that exacerbates, increase, intensify symptoms. He says here, she changes her insecure thoughts to secure thoughts. We have thoughts that are making us feel uneasy, that are feeling overwhelmed, feeling like we can't get out of bed. Well, there are other thoughts we can have, we can entertain. We don't have to entertain these thoughts that are making us feel bad, which we'll call intruders in our brain. We don't have to entertain intruders in our brain. We then exchange those thoughts, insecure thoughts, for secure thoughts, and have other feelings which will be motivated by the secure thoughts. Feelings rise and fall and run their natural course and come to an end if you don't attach danger to the feelings and you don't obsess on them. Usually you obsess on something because it is somehow a threat, that you perceive it as a threat. So you feel insecure. You perceive these thoughts as a threat, and so that causes you to become preoccupied with them, and you don't allow them from coming and going as thoughts and feelings commonly do. Feelings rise and fall, thoughts come and go, as long as you don't attach danger to them. All right. She spots that to be a patient, and not expect a change immediately or immediate results. People frustrate themselves continuously by expecting instant results And when they don't get instant results, even if this is something they would like to take up or pursue a hobby activity, they don't get instant results, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. And it can be anything that you can imagine. It could be bowling, taking up basketball, or going to basketball games. You don't get instant results. Well, I tried and failed. That doesn't work for me. Generalities that are covering up the issue, covering up the realistic facts of the situation. So this is why we have the spotting techniques that allows us to become objective, that points us in the way of objectivity, of being coolly rational, logical, and looking at the facts. And then we can see that we are making improvement. Rome wasn't built in a day. Things take time. I have engaged in other learning processes, and I went through a struggle of learning on discomfort. I bore the discomfort of learning in the initial stages and persevered through, and then the learning took hold, and now I can drive a car safely, enjoyably, when at first it was very uncomfortable trying to check the mirrors and steer the car correctly and apply the brake or the clutch. I was overwhelmed, but we persevere. The surest way to comfort is to bear the discomfort. So all our rules and axioms point us in the way of looking, examining our environment, what is the true nature of what is happening, the objective facts, and not our imaginings that may be colored by our fears, our biases, our anger. Fear and anger, strong emotions, block the ability to reason. And this is why so many of us are overwhelmed by our environment, the stresses and strains of daily living, because we have no coping mechanism. We have nothing to point us in the way of objectivity so that we can set aside our emotions and look, take a cool appraisal of what is really occurring and evaluate it thusly. All right. He says, I bore the discomfort, knowing in the long run comfort would come. And the surest way to comfort is to bear the discomfort. And again, if you look back over your experiences, you will find that this is true. She gives herself a pat on the back for spotting and preventing a vicious cycle from occurring. Good job, well done, getting better. Kudos. And she says here, and I might add, I have read Getting Better as example before, and it seems to be some of the posters think Getting Better is a man, and some of them think she's a woman. And from my reading of her post, I think that Getting Better is a female. Before recovery, I would have sat on the couch and pampered my feelings and coddled my thoughts. In other words, she would sit on the couch in despair, but positive that she couldn't cope. She would never be able to function another day. So this is pampering and coddling our feelings. This is protecting our reality, our feelings, our thoughts. And we dare not let anyone tell us anything to the contrary, because this pain and misery is what we know. And we can't imagine how it would be to be without it. So we're going to protect it from any attack, anyone telling us or giving us advice that will diminish it in any way. It's been with us so many years, we've been unable to eradicate it, diminish it, get rid of it, so it's an old friend. So now we try to protect it. We coddle and pamper it. And we take no advice to the contrary, or any advice which would be helpful in any way. As she says, before recovery I would have sat on the couch and pampered my feelings and coddled my thoughts, and probably stayed like this for days. And as she was formerly anorexic, she would have tried to control the environment through not eating food. Thanks, getting better. Now, we have a few replies to this. And let's see what we have here. Chuck Cohen replies, it's not how we feel, it's how we function. Getting better, function with symptoms. And I might add, she functioned in spite of symptoms, which is always a plus and something to give yourself endorsement for. The total view is most mornings the vigor is fine, while the partial view is some morning symptoms exist. And as you can see, Getting Better was focusing on the narrow partial view until she became objective, and then she could take the total view, in this case, which dispelled symptoms and their accompanying sensations. Getting Better touched on all the points of what Recovery Incorporated stands for: realism, plain common sense, and an unspoiled way of looking at life. Yes, exactly. The very principles we teach also here on Self-Talk. Lots of opportunity to endorse for making a business of one's mental health. She is not playing a game, giving lip service to her pursuit of mental health. She is examining principles, she has found the system, and she is applying it consistently and not making excuses or complaining. The complaining habit. Complaining avails us nothing except it keeps the symptoms going and intensifies them and makes them worse. So if you're complaining about your symptoms, stop that immediately as step one, and bear the discomfort, and the symptoms will begin to diminish. Red Miss spots in on this post. She says, I can spot there's no right or wrong in triviality. Getting Better broke a vicious cycle. She had the fear of the permanent handicap, and she quotes, a fearful temper, I would not be able to function today or tomorrow. That is a fear of the permanent handicap. And that is sabotage, actually, because there are no hopeless cases. You may feel helpless, and I may be helpless, you may be helpless, but there are cases not hopeless. And that is the big difference. As soon as we find a method to help ourselves, then we get results. But if we feel our case is hopeless, we won't even look for a method, and therefore we're trapped in a vicious cycle. Muscles re-educate or retrain the brain, or re-educate the brain. And she quotes, feeling like this feeling would paralyze me. She moved her muscles, and when she moved her muscles, she proved to the brain that the feeling would not, in fact, paralyze her. It was transient, flitting. It was come and go. If you move your muscles, you can't command your muscles to move. Lots of past practice, lots to endorse for the past practice. She has gained the conviction that the method does indeed work. So she has faith in the method, the authoritative knowledge of Dr. Lowe, and the behavioral modification techniques, which are in the form of these axioms, such as Red Miss quotes here, we do things to get well. We do not wait to get well to do things. And this is correct. This is the best way to do it. That's her improvement over before she learned the method, which is the fourth step. Duty calls for an average act. She was self-led, not symptom-led. She can and did function in discomfort, and in spite of the discomfort. It's not how we feel, it's how we function, which will eradicate our symptoms that are distressing but not dangerous. Symptoms are distressing, but they are not dangerous, typically. She did what she feared and dreaded to do, and the death of that fear is certain when you oppose it by doing what you fear and dread to do. She is practicing recovery with ruthless determination, letting nothing get in her way. She's practicing consistently over time. Every inner victory is worth countless outer victories. Giving in to sitting on the couch and doing nothing. What are your choices? We're entitled to our initial response. The feeling comes over us, but we are responsible for what we do afterwards. We're not responsible for the feeling coming, but we're responsible for getting rid of it. And I see that our show is coming to an end, and this has been Self-Talk, and I hope to see you again next week. Have a great day.